Good afternoon, everyone. It's my distinct pleasure to welcome you back to the Career Development Workshop hosted by the Leadership Alliance in partnership with Johns Hopkins University. I am Damani Piggott. I am Assistant Dean for Graduate Biomedical Education and Graduate Student Diversity and a faculty member in the Division of Infectious Diseases and Department of Epidemiology at Johns Hopkins University and an alumnus of the Leadership Alliance program. The Leadership Alliance is a national consortium of research and teaching colleges and universities that are united by a shared vision to train, to mentor, and to inspire a diverse group of students to be leaders and role models in all career sectors. The purpose of this panel is to hear perspectives from Leadership Alliance alumni who themselves are leaders in academia, industry, and government. Just as a brief overview for today's session, we will have some opening remarks from our panelists. We will then take questions from our audience today. And finally, we will transition into 3 breakout rooms at the end of the first hour with each of our panelists. We invite all our participants to submit questions at any point throughout the session for the panelists via the Q&A tool. With that, I'm extremely excited to be joined for this panel today by 4 distinguished scholars and leaders: Dr. Marcus Jones, Associate Director, Research Program Management at Regeneron Pharmaceuticals; Dr. Courtney Newsom, Senior Research Investigator, Immunology, Molecular Toxicology, and Drug Safety Evaluation at Bristol Myers Squibb; Dr. Leslie Rivera Rosado, Lieutenant Commander of the U.S. Public Health Service Commission Corps and Product Quality Team Leader at the Food and Drug Administration; and Dr. Arturo Zavala, Associate Professor of Psychology and Co-Director of the BUILD Initiative at California State University. Welcome, everyone. So I'd like to open our session by asking each of our panelists to share who you are, what you do on a daily basis, and how you came to be doing what you do. Maybe I could start with Dr. Jones.
Thank you, Damani. Thank you, everybody, for coming in. It's a pleasure to be here. So, as Damani said, my name is Marcus Jones, and I'm a research program manager at Regeneron. So I was a Leadership Alliance fellow, dating myself, back in 1999, where I had the pleasure of going to NYU and really opening my eyes to science and how biomedical research was done. I did my undergraduate at Southern University A&M College in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and graduated in 1996. And then, in 2000, getting old. And then from 2000 to 2005, I was at NYU School of Medicine, where I did my PhD in microbiology and infectious diseases. And from there, I went on to do a postdoc, staff scientist assistant professor at the J. Craig Venture Institute. And I was there for about 10 years doing academic research, writing grants, and really loving academia, studying the microbiome and infectious diseases. From there, I decided to pivot and take a toss at a startup company called Human Longevity. So I started with the company, part of the startup team, and I was the co-director of microbiome research and was there from 2014 to 16. But then in 2016, I wanted to try something a little different to be more strategic in science. So moving away from the bench and moving to program management, where I was more involved in the higher level strategy of working with senior management at Regeneron to drive some of the new strategic visions of the company. And in my current role, what I do is I set up and drive all of the collaborations for the Genetics Center. So identifying those partners around the world where we working together to build one of the largest genetic resources in the world, where we've sequenced over 1 million people, and making that resource available to all of our academic partners and a big part of it to the world through the UK Biobank. So on a daily basis, I get to talk science and really drive scientific agenda for Regeneron.
Fantastic. Thank you, Dr. Jones. Next, I'll ask Dr. Newsom, if you would share.
Hi, everyone. Thank you all for joining us today. My name is Courtney Newsom. I am a native of Mississippi and a proud graduate of an HBCU, Tougaloo College, Go Bulldogs. I finished my PhD in pathobiology from Brown University and did postdoctoral training in immunology at Sloan Kettering in New York and Rutgers University here in New Jersey. Well, currently, I'm a senior research investigator, as Damani mentioned, at Bristol Myers Squibb, which is a global pharmaceutical company primarily based in New Jersey, New York, and the Northeast area. My field is in immunomolecular toxicology, so my ultimate role is to evaluate if a drug is safe using non-clinical models before going into clinical trials and to evaluate the effects of these drugs on the immune system. So my role is pretty varied. It's never the same on a day-to-day basis, which is part of what I love about what I do. I'm a manager of people, including some of the laboratory scientists, so I'm responsible for their day-to-day tasks and their development. I assist in the design of non-clinical safety studies to make sure that all the correct experiments to assess if the drug is going to have an effect on the immune system is included on a particular study. I design and occasionally sometimes go into the laboratory to conduct experiments to see how the drug affect the immune cells and their purpose on the different cells of the body. And I interpret these results and ultimately write up the results that are going to be used for FDA filing to make sure that we get all of the correct experiments done and everything is reported correctly for the regulatory agencies. As I ultimately became into immunomolecular toxicology because my PhD is in pathobiology, and my thesis focused on the effects of a clinical grade beta-glucan, which is a fungal pathogen, on sepsis using a murine mouse model. And I took immunology as a course as a graduate student and really enjoyed learning about how the different immune cells work together and how complex the immune system is. So my job now is sort of a hybrid of both of those, where I get to look at disease state model and sort of toxicology safety assessment and the immune system. And I was in Leadership Alliance in 2003 at Brown University, so it's really nice to see everything sort of come full circle and be with you all here today.
Fantastic. Thank you, Dr. Newsom. So next, I'll ask Dr. Rivera Rosado if she could share.
All right. Hi. Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here virtually with all of us. My name is Leslie Rivera Rosado. I am a Leadership Alliance alum from 2000, I believe. I did my summer research internship at Hopkins. And eventually, after I graduated from University of Puerto Rico, I went to Hopkins to pursue my PhD in biochemistry, cellular molecular biology. After I finished there, I applied for a postdoc at the FDA. And I was at the FDA in that research role for 3 years, and then moved into research regulatory fellowship with the FDA and the NCI. National Cancer Institute at the NIH, and I did that for about a year before I moved into my position as a full-time regulatory assessor at the FDA Office of Pharmaceutical Quality, Office of Biotechnology Products. So right now I lead and manage a team of doctoral scientists that assess all of the regulatory information submitted to the FDA for the chemistry, manufacturing, and control of novel and complex biological products. Our goal at the FDA, and in particular of the Office of Pharmaceutical Quality, is to ensure that every single dose of our medicines are safe and effective, and they're free of contamination and any defects. So every patient can be assured that each dose of the medication is of quality. I also, as you can see, hold a rank of Lieutenant Commander in the United States Public Health Service, which is one of the 8 uniformed services of the United States. That is the uniform service of the Department of Health and Human Services. And I'll be happy to talk to any of you about either my role at the FDA or as a part of the Public Health Service. Thank you.
Fantastic. Okay, so to close it out, Dr. Zavala.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you for being here, and thank you for the Leadership Alliance for having me today. As it was mentioned, I am an associate professor in psychology at California State University, Long Beach, and I'm also sort of a co-director of the Build Training Program, which is a grant that is funded by NIH to try to help diversify the biomedical workforce, similar to sort of the goals of the Leadership Alliance. And so I primarily work at a master's comprehensive university that sort of emphasizes a balance between teaching and research. And so I teach courses in behavioral neuroscience and at the undergraduate level. And I also have a lab that I work primarily with undergraduate students, but also master's students to do sort of research in neuroscience, and we particularly focus on looking at sort of the functional consequences of drugs across development using animal models. So a lot of my daily activities is meeting with students, working with them on their projects, helping them with applications when they're applying for doctoral programs or even master's programs, and also doing a lot of service-related activities as part of the Build grant. And my main roles in sort of the Build grant have also been to sort of help develop research infrastructure within our campus. And so what's unique about this grant is it allowed us to provide resources for faculty that normally other training grants didn't. And so we provide opportunities in terms of helping faculty gain access to equipment, as well as to get help in their extramural applications, and also provide infrastructure funds for the university. And so I help lead the efforts to renovate the space that we have in the psychology department to be able to provide training opportunities for students. And so how I sort of got here is I went to a campus similar to Cal State Long Beach at Cal State University San Bernardino, where I was an undergrad. There I got my bachelor's in psychology, and it's when I also participated as an alumni for the Leadership Alliance. I'm a little bit older than the rest. Only Damani can actually relate to me, but I did the Leadership Alliance at Yale University back in 1995. And I really enjoyed the opportunity that the Leadership Alliance gave me, because coming from a Cal State, which is it's not a research one university, it's primarily an undergraduate university. The opportunity to be able to do research at Yale University was really exciting. And in all honesty, it was a little bit scary as well, right? We talked about in the earlier sessions about the imposter syndrome, and I didn't feel prepared, but when I got to the Leadership Alliance, they really sort of embraced me and really gave me the opportunities to want to motivate me to pursue a career in science as well. And I also had great mentors when I was an undergrad at Cal State San Bernardino. And specifically, they also worked with students, had training grants, and developed neuroscience in the department. And when I was with them, I really enjoyed working with students. So I would train other students as part of being a master's program. And I would also teach, and I really liked that aspect. And so I kind of made the goal to try to be like my mentors that were at Cal State San Bernardino. And so I got my PhD, or I applied to PhDs and got into a program at Arizona State University where I continued to do work in neuroscience and work with animal models to study drug addiction. And during the last 2 years of my program, the opportunity came to actually work at Cal State Long Beach. And traditionally in neuroscience, you have to do a postdoctoral work and get more training before you get into a faculty position. But since the opportunity came, I applied, and because I had worked really hard as an undergrad and master's and doctoral students, I was competitive enough to apply because I had a lot of publications. And again, the imposter syndrome sort of kicked in, but I still applied anyways, and I got the job. And so I started working at Cal State Long Beach in 2008, and ever since I've been there, I've made an effort to try to develop neuroscience just as my mentors have, and really focus on trying to provide opportunities for students to be able to get hands-on experiences, not only in research lab, but also trying to get these opportunities within the framework of teaching, and so trying to develop teaching labs similar to what my mentors had done at Cal State San Bernardino. And so I've been there since 2008, and we've had quite a few successes in terms of getting students off to doctoral programs. And I'd be happy to talk to people about the different trajectories in academia. There's certainly different levels that you can pursue So those that are more research oriented and those that are more teaching oriented. Thank you for having me.
Fantastic. All right, thank you. So I'm going to just remind folks just to, again, please feel free to type questions into the Q&A at any point along the way. I'd like to just open up, if I may, with asking our panelists. So it's a two-pronged question. So when did you first become interested in science as a career path? And was there a pivotal or specific experience or relationship that motivated you to pursue your current career?
So, when that first instance when and I'm sorry if you hear the background, my toddler, he's running around crazy. But the first experience that I had that really put me on the path for going into science as a career was my Leadership Alliance experience in 1999. I got to go to NYU and I really understood and saw what opportunities were there in science. So I saw the bench, I saw what you could do in business and marketing, everything. That experience with the Leadership Alliance really helped open my eyes. And it was also through all the mentoring that I got from Deva, from Valerie, who used to lead the Leadership Alliance, and my mentor, Joel Oppenheim, and the mentor I had while I was at NYU. Just having that nurturing environment really catapulted me on this projection to go into science. And I can't thank the Leadership Alliance enough for giving me that opportunity, because before coming to Lands, I was fixed on going to med school. I knew I was going to med school, but then I got that true exposure to scientific research, and it was enlightening. And I got to see how I could really apply myself to a scientific problem, and then from there, it just cascaded.
Yeah, I'll go next. I had sort of a similar, background as Marcus a little bit. So my parents were very big on education when I was growing up. My maternal grandparents were high school STEM teachers, so we always had math and science books around the house. So I ultimately thought that I was going to study chemistry because that sort of fueled my interest in science and math and combined the two. But I had several family members who became ill and was always interested in medical shows like Trauma, Life in the ER. So I knew that I wanted to do something that would allow me to help people. But I really wasn't introduced to different careers in science other than healthcare and medical school until later in my educational journey. So I had several experiences as an undergraduate in chemistry, like computational chemistry research, medical shadowing, and ultimately the Leadership Alliance. So I didn't continue down the medical MD track, but I still got a chance to fulfill my initial goal that was to stay involved in science and to impact the health of people. I guess my research experience at Brown through the Leadership Alliance was my first experience in a biology lab, and that played a huge role in my decision to pursue a career in clinically important laboratory research, since I am at a pharmaceutical company today. Like I mentioned before, I majored in chemistry and all these other experiences like computational chemistry and public health. But the Leadership Alliance is when I really became introduced to laboratory techniques and skills that I still use on a daily basis when I do go into the laboratory, as well as some of the other soft people skills like presenting, writing, collaborating, teamwork, and those sort of things with colleagues.
Great.
I can quickly go next. So I think I was always interested in science since I was a little kid. The interest really developed in high school, and I was, as probably a lot of you, in the science fair like every year. And, my parents really nurtured that and took me to all of the science fairs events, and they, picked up the phone and called universities so I can go and meet people and, kind of just tour the labs and things like that. So then when I went to college, I went into a industrial microbiology program. And my thought was, okay, I like science. And it looks like with this degree, if I finish a bachelor's, I can do, quality control, quality assessment at some pharmaceutical company. At that time, Puerto Rico was really big. We had a lot of pharmaceuticals manufacturers in Puerto Rico. So I thought that was a great plan. So I did that. And halfway through my degree, I applied to the MARCS program, the Minority Access to Research Careers program. And that really was when I decided that research was something that I wanted to give it a try. So I did undergraduate research at University of Puerto Rico, and then applied through the Leadership Alliance to summer research at Hopkins. And that's when I really realized, I can do this. Like, I can do this as a career, as a job. So I applied to Hopkins, and through my years there is when I realized that I didn't think academia was going to be for me. And I always had an interest in public service. So when I was looking for postdoctoral opportunities, that's when, I learned that, not only NIH, but also CDC and FDA have opportunities for postdocs. So that's what I decided to do. And that's how I ended up at the FDA. So, it's good to know that with your doctoral degree, not only can you decide to go into academia or into private industry, but you can also do so many other things, including regulatory work or policy. And it's been a journey. You just have to kind of be open to different opportunities and just go for it.
Great. And I think just before Dr. Zavala, I think Dr. Rosado, there was a question about how did you end up in the U.S. Public Health Service Commission Corps? It sounded like this is a concurrent position to yours at the FDA. How does that work?
Yes, thank you. I did see that. So when I was doing my postdoc at FDA, right after graduation, I got to know and meet a lot of public health service officers that worked at NIH. At the time, the FDA had 3 buildings at the NIH campus where we were doing research. But NIH is right across the street from the Naval Medical Center. So I thought, it's just military people on campus. But then when I learned about the public health service, I decided to investigate, do some informational interviews with some of the officers and see what it's all about. So that's when I applied for a commission at the Public Health Service right after my postdoc. And it took a little bit of time to get my application through, but that's why I hold a commission right now. So the way it works is the Public Health Service is part of the Department of Health and Human Services. So the officers of the Public Health Service work in all of the HHS agencies, and we are placed in roles that are either hard to fill by other professions or by civilians, or leadership positions within the agencies. So yes, my position at the FDA is a public health commission corps position. So I do what a normal civilian will do concurrently with my duties as a commission officer.
Great, thanks, Dr. Rivera. Dr. Zavala, if I could come back to you. So when did you first become interested in science as a career path, and was there a pivotal or specific experience or relationship that motivated you?
I like what Dr. Rivera says about how when she was younger, she always had the passion, because that's what I try to do with my kids now. Because unfortunately, I don't have a story where I really was sort of on the path to science when I was going through school. I was an immigrant, so we came from Mexico, and I lived in Southeast Los Angeles, and a lot of the school systems there were not necessarily geared towards pushing people into very academic careers, or mostly they were just sort of trying to get you through. And so really my passion for science and wanting to pursue a science career, it was really when I was as an undergraduate, right? Taking these classes that taught me about research methods, research designs, and also the opportunities, as I said in my introduction, of going to universities to be able to conduct research at sort of a high cutting edge research at those institutions was really the pivotal moment that really got me to want to go into science. And so I took advantage as much as I could as an undergrad to take opportunities during the summers to do research. And the Leadership Alliance was one of them, but I also did another one at UC San Francisco. And those experiences really solidified my interest in wanting to pursue. And I really took to heart the passion that the Leadership Alliance had in terms of helping train students and helping them get into doctoral programs and diversifying the biomedical workforce, not only just in academia, but also in industry, and looking at and meeting those people that were headed that back in 1995 really inspired me to want to sort of pursue a career like that. And I was very much interested in following that particular path as well.
Great, thank you. The next question that would have actually, I'm gonna juxtapose these questions. There's a question in the chat about what were some of the most important things you did during graduate school that were critical in preparing you for your next career step. And if I may sort of add to that question, so what is it that I know you all, several of you mentioned things during your training. Are there additional things that you would share that you did during your training to prepare you for your current career? If you had to do it over again, what would you have done during your training to prepare you for your current career? I think that juxtaposes to that question.
I'll start. I think during my training, I took advantage of several different research and professional development experiences like the Leadership Alliance, and took the opportunity to present at several different research conferences. I took additional courses that really weren't a part of my academic track, such as scientific writing courses, and really began to build up the network of individuals who were my peers and now scientific colleagues, and kept in contact with some of the mentors that I'd established through Leadership Alliance and other venues as well. I really tried to diversify the types of science that I learned, because at the beginning of my career, I really didn't want to be sort of characterized or funneled as a particular type of scientist when I was first starting out. So I took the time to read several different types of journals and attended different scientific meetings that weren't necessarily in my direct field of interest. But some things that I did start to do once I did start to sort of specialize a little bit was to join different subcommittees on professional organizations in order to get my name out there, someone who's a scientific expert in my particular field. And these are all some things that you all can start to do now, such as learning as much as you can about several different fields and really building your network and start to establish your brand as an expert in your field.
Yeah, I would echo Courtney. I mean, one of the key things I find, and I continue to refine this as I go on, is communication. Communication is probably one of the more key soft skills that you can keep working on and develop throughout your entire academic professional career. Because you think, as a scientist, our job is to communicate the science. We communicate, what the truth of the science is. We don't try to overinterpret. We don't try to lead. We report the science, and how we communicate it is critical, whether we're in academia, industry, or in the government. Some of those other critical aspects were multitasking and management. You have to be able to really organize yourself so that you can, manage multiple projects at one time, and working on those relationships. So it's all about developing those networks and those relationships that will help actually open many doors for you. And the way I look at just my academic and professional development, and I got this from one of my mentors, so it's not my own original thought, is we look at it in 3 bubbles. So you have your technical bubble, where you're learning your skills of the PCR, the actual functional things you do day to day in the lab or in research. But then you have your relational and that technical bubble, where it's how you relate with people. I'm sorry, the third one is influential. You have to be able to work through others. You can't always be the one doing the gel, doing the experiments. You have to learn to work with those other scientists, those postdocs or grad students, to have them do the actual work for you, and they become your hands. So, you know, as we're going early in our careers, we're really refining that technical bubble on how we get strong in the science. But that technical bubble only gets so big. The ones that can really help you grow in your career are those relational and influential bubbles. And those can never get big enough. So the more you learn to relate and people see you as a strong scientist, as well as influence scientists and others, that's how you really progress in your career.
I can jump in here too. I want to echo the networking part. I think we always hear that in professional conferences, and it's so true to network. And I think part of that is you have to learn to be assertive, right? And you have to force yourself to reach out to people, to be an advocate for yourself, and to take risk in that direction, right? I really like the session on resiliency because they talked a little bit about that you do have to be assertive and take command and take charge. And part of the other thing that I think I learned in grad school is that you need to apply for as many opportunities as you can, right? Oftentimes you feel people reject themselves. And one piece of advice that I got when I was an undergrad was that you should never reject yourself, right? Even if you think you can't get the scholarship, get into the program that you want, and you convince yourself that you shouldn't apply, that's the wrong attitude to have, right? You should really not reject yourself. You should put your best foot forward and apply to as many things as you can, go to as many conferences, network with people. And even if you don't get into those, right, you have to learn to be resilient, right? And figure out a plan of what is the next step. I always talk about you're going to fail quite a bit, right, as a scientist, and you're going to fail quite a bit at getting these opportunities, but you have to sort of pick yourself up and be assertive and have a plan as to what you're going to do next to try to get these opportunities, to be able to network with people, because those opportunities are not going to come unless you're a strong advocate for yourself.
Great.
Hi, so I want to address the part of if you had to do it all over again, what would you do different? And I think, you know, as a scientist in the bench, you know, when you're doing basic research, it's very easy to lose yourself into that, you know, going into the lab every day, doing your work, you know, publishing your papers. And it's really difficult, at least I fell into that kind of day-to-day, that I forgot to think about what I was going to do after I finish my PhD. And I think I will advise everyone to take some time to think about what is it that you want to do with your degree once you're done, because there are so many options for jobs and careers outside of academia, and you have to prepare yourself for those, right? And I felt like being a scientist teaches you a lot of skills and a lot of soft skills that will help you transition into any career. But it would have been nice if I had known ahead of time before I graduated what I wanted to do and started to prepare myself for those in those areas that maybe I wasn't as strong. So I was lucky that my postdoc position allowed me to get those skills and to network with people in the area that I wanted to eventually move into. But I wish I had done that earlier. So that's my advice to you. If you can, you know, take a little time to think about what's next before you are almost graduating.
Great, thank you. Thank you, everyone. So the next question in the chat is, what's a typical workday like for those in industry? And I'll just tag on what's a typical workday like for everyone.
Well, I can start from industry. So at Regeneron, you know, it's a very different place. It's kind of that hybrid of industry and academia. And so it's, you know, there's seminars and meetings pretty much I go to all day. So, you know, we'll have a scientific seminar in different therapeutic areas or different areas of biology. But for my position, my role, I'm in a lot of strategy meetings, strategic alignment meetings, where bringing in together cross-functional teams and really thinking about how we're going to address a problem. So we are looking at data, we are looking at results, and thinking about how we could develop a new therapeutic or what's the appropriate modality that we should be developing for a new target. So but for those in the labs at Regeneron, it's very much like being in an academic lab where they're doing their experiments, they're planning them out, and they're presenting their results and data at their lab meetings.
Right. I'll piggyback from an industry standpoint. So I'm sort of, I guess, a hybrid role where I'm in the lab a small percent of the time, but most of my time is spent outside of the lab, as Marcus said. So I think one misconception that a lot of people have is that industry is a 9-to-5 job, which in my case has definitely not been the case. But I guess one thing is that you are sort of working on the needs of the company since it is a business. So your role may change day to day depending on what the business may need to get done. One day I may need to present and organize data based off of a certain target to present it to a strategy team or someone like Marcus. Some days I may actually need to go into the lab to conduct the experiments. Some days I might need to write up the report for the actual data and organize and make sure that it's correct form to go to the FDA for filing. So it all varies depending on, honestly, the needs of the company, but it's definitely not a set in stone 9-to-5 position, which is, I think, a lot of people think that it is, but it's not.
Thanks. And Dr. Rivera Rosado and Dr. Zavala, your day.
Sure. So I don't know if I have a day that is the same as the day before, other than the fact that we do a lot of reading, a lot of assessing of data, and a lot of writing and a lot of communicating to internal stakeholders and external stakeholders. So, in a day I can be working on an investigational new drug application or a license application or changes to manufacturing processes for approved products. In the current situation that we're living in right now, we are working really hand in hand with industry to develop therapies and for COVID, and to help them make space for manufacturing those therapies here in the US. So in the last couple of months, a lot of my time has been spent, helping industry open up that capacity for manufacture of therapies here in the US. And yeah, other than that, leading a team and helping them, through their professional development and communicating with management, that's kind of the day-to-day on my side in government.
Great.
And lastly, I'll just add, well, obviously the day-to-day changes in academia were much more research focused during the summer, right? Because that's when summers and winters is when you can really focus on doing research. And then during the academic year, a lot of it is teaching and service. And so, and there are different sort of models. At our campus, I would say during the academic year, it's about 50%, 60% teaching, 40% research, right? And just a little bit for service after that. But during the summer, it's mostly doing research, working with students. And lately, of course, it's been Zoom and being in these little boxes because of COVID-19, and trying to plan right now for how we're going to reopen during this pandemic. It's a little bit more difficult since obviously there's challenges with being able to do research, at least at the universities, and even having classes online.
Okay, great. Thanks, everyone. So the next question asked, is it possible to carve out a career in science that is outside of academia, but also emphasizes basic science? And then the question was, translational work is less exciting for me.
But you can go ahead.
Thanks. I think I want to take a stab at this one. At least in what I do, requires all of your knowledge of that basic research and all of the lab techniques that you learned when you were in grad school, because everything that we assess and analyze is based, like Courtney and Marcus said, in their research, like their research results that we get to see after everything is done, and see how that data supports the safe and effective use of a therapy. So in my case, I would say it's actually quite easy to transition into a career like regulatory science, where you're doing something different, but it's very much tied to the basic research.
Right. I think that a lot of people think that it's really not easy to transition from academia to industry, but that's really not the case, especially if you go into sort of the discovery space of industry, which is sort of the space that I'm in now, because you still have to use all of your basic science background to know, okay, if you have a drug that's going to target this particular cell, you have to reach back in your science knowledge and figure out which signaling pathway does this cell impact, or what may be the best way to evaluate it in terms of the laboratory techniques. So I think even if you do go into industry, you still utilize the basic science that you've learned as a graduate student and postdoc. You don't completely throw those away. You never lose those.
Right. So I think the next question actually speaks to the same thing, potentially a related thing. So so I'm going to ask the question, and then I'm going to actually ask a related question as well. So for those of you that transition from academia to industry, how did you leverage your PhD postdoc experience to get your first job outside of academia? And what was that transition like? What I'd like to sort of add to that question is, what advice would you offer in the approach to finding a job after training? Could you comment on what factors worked and did not work for you in the job search process? So things like sources of information, role of advisors, prior mentors, etc. Negotiating money.
I can go first. So, that transition from academia to industry. So, for me, it was a two-step. So I went from academia to startup, which is kind of a in between industry and academia, and then to Regeneron. So what I did and what I found was critical is really those networks. To get into Regeneron, it's one, you have to be good in your science. So they're not gonna bring in anyone that they think they're not gonna live up to the challenge, because places like Regeneron and industry, there is a lot of scrutiny in your science, and they do expect you to be at a high caliber. But it was that connection I had from one of my previous mentors that actually worked at Regeneron, who opened the door. And it's not that we're in academia, you don't have the skills and training to get in, but often at industry, they go to people they know, and there's those networks they know, and that pedigree they know, because they know it's reliably trained. Oh, you came from this lab or this institution. So that's why it's so critical to do the networking and to develop those mentors outside of your general circle, because those are the ones that can really open the door to industry for you. One of the key fellowships I did was the Keystone Symposia Fellowship, where it connected me with a whole range of different individuals in academia, and industry, and having those connections are what opened the door for me to Regeneron. And I guess for that transition, sorry, Damani, it was...
Yeah, the other question was, it was just the approach to finding a job after training.
Right. So I took two different approaches. One, I tried to do throw a million applications out there, and that kind of fell flat for me. But what really was the key to success is pinpointing someone I knew that worked at Regeneron. And, he opened the door for me and gave me the opportunity. And I just kicked it in and went for it.
Yeah, I'll piggyback off of that. So I unfortunately didn't have a connection at BMS, and the connections that I did have in industry that really weren't in my field of interest. So I had to apply for several jobs before I found my current position, since I primarily looked on companies' websites and used LinkedIn to see what opportunities was available. I guess looking back, I definitely think that I applied for too many positions, some for which I was either overqualified for or underqualified for based on some of the job description. So one of my first pieces of advice would be, if you really want to sort of look into industry and don't really have a connection, is to really take the time to look at the position and the job readout that you want to apply for based on your qualification and level of training, and make sure that you sort of cater your CV and resume exactly for what's on that.
Great. Other X on approaches to finding jobs?
I want to piggyback on what Dr. Newsom just said, and a lot of times I've sat in a lot of review panels for faculty positions, and people don't always address the qualifications or the descriptions, and so it's really important to make sure that you address all the desired and preferred qualifications when you're applying for a job, right? Don't leave it up to the people that are looking at your application figure it out from your CV. If you don't make the assumption that, oh, they'll be able to see that I have this already in my CV. Instead, sort of address it in your cover letter. And I think the cover letter is probably one of the most important things, because people, that's the first thing that people read. And so there you want to, again, be an advocate for yourself and sort of address the issues and contextualize your experience to how it fits well with the job that they're asking you to do, right? And a lot of times, I think, I'm sitting on a lot of these panels, when you're trying to transition from academia or as a grad student into a industry job, right? You have to be creative and sort of thinking about your experiences as a grad student, right? Managing, leading projects, working with the team. Those kinds of experiences also translate into the industry, but you have to be sort of the advocate for yourself and highlight those points so that people don't necessarily see that.
Dr. Rivera?
I think I want to expand on something that Arturo said, and it's very important, and Courtney too, to tailor your CV or your resume to the job that you're applying to. When you're applying to jobs in the government, you will do it through USA Jobs, and they ask you some questions related to the skills you have that are related to the position. When you upload your CV or build your CV in USA Jobs, you absolutely have to make sure you address each and every requirement for that job, and also use the same language that the job posting is using, because the first screening is most likely not going to be done by a person. So you definitely want to make sure that the computer algorithm knows that you are qualified to do that job before your application actually makes it to a human being. And being part of the Commission Corps, I have learned is very important to show the impact of what you do in your CV. So it's not the same to say, I published this paper, than to say, I led a research team that discovered X, Y, and Z and resulted in this publication that impacted the lives of this many people because it ended up being a drug or something like that, right? So showing the impact of what you're doing instead of just stating things that you can do is very important, and will separate your application from everyone else's.
Fantastic. So we're coming to a close on this first hour, and I would just like to close this part of the session. We're definitely not coming to a close of the interaction and the conversation, because we're going to be going out into breakout rooms afterwards to continue this conversation. But I'd like to just close this part of the session by asking our panelists to respond briefly in about a minute or so to either or both of these questions. So what is it that you wish you had known? What information do you have now that you wish you would have had during your training? And or what parting advice would you like to share with those who have joined with us today?
I would say my advice is, don't be scared of taking a chance on an opportunity that maybe it's not necessarily what you thought was going to be your next step, but that can definitely position you to where you want to be in the future.
Thank you.
I think I wish that I would have gained a greater understanding of the fact that science is a business as well as innovation, and that learning how to interview, network, the soft people skills that we've all mentioned, professional presentation, communication are just as important as actual work, since all these skills have to be aligned in order for the greatest productivity for the company or the institution or the academic arena that you're a part of. Also, I wanted to encourage everyone that you do have to stay flexible and to learn as much as you can, and don't be afraid to step out of your comfort zones and to seek out and continue to build your diverse, wide network of colleagues and mentors. And don't be afraid to bet on yourself and know that you deserve to be in whatever space you desire to be and can go as high as you want to go.
Fantastic.
Yeah, Courtney stole all my answers. The only thing else I would say is, speak with confidence. You're the expert in your field, and if you seem too timid, they're not going to think you know what you're talking about. Always be confident in your response. You can be wrong, or even if you don't know something, don't be afraid to say, I don't know. But you can always look it up and research it because you're a scientist.
Excellent.
And I'll just add, I obviously agree with all the sentiments that have been said already. I think the one thing you should do too is you should surround yourself with people that are like you, right? And so it's hard sometimes to find people, like even if you think about those that are pursuing doctoral degrees, right? It's only a small percentage of those that are in schools, right? Or those that are wanting to go to industry or whatever. And so you want to make sure you build a network of people that are at your level, right? That can sort of help you achieve the connections that you need in order to get to the job that you want to do. So
outstanding. So I think, well, with that, I want to just say that I want to thank all our panelists for just the tremendous wisdom and openness today. We're so appreciative for your sharing with our participants. And I know we can't do this virtually, but a huge round of applause to all of you. So we are going to, again, continue this conversation and invite all our participants now to join us in one of our 3 breakout rooms with our panelists. I believe, so the links for that may be posted soon here, but they are in the agenda which you've received. We have 3 breakout rooms, and one for academia, we'll continue conversation with Dr. Zavala, one for industry, we'll continue conversation with Dr. Jones and Dr. Newsom, and one for government and nonprofit, we'll continue conversation with Dr. Rivera Rosado. With that, we definitely hope that you click over and continue the conversation with us. And thank you so much for joining us for this session and for the other parts of the workshop event today as well. Thank you.